The Sony ZV-E1 and the a7C Mark II. What is the difference? I mean, after all, they're priced the same, and if you're looking to get a Sony full-frame camera, it might be hard to figure out which one will be best for you because they do have a lot of the same video features as well. So let's take a look at some of the design features along with sample footage from each camera to help you figure out which one will be the best for your videos. With each of these cameras, you get a full frame sensor. However, the major difference is that the a7C II gives you a 34 megapixel sensor, whereas the ZV-E1 has a 12 megapixel sensor. And if you have any questions about either of these cameras that I don't cover or just about anything I'm talking about in general, feel free to post them down in the comments and I'll try to help make sense of it for you there. But hearing that the a7C II has a 34 megapixel sensor over a 12 megapixel sensor probably makes you just want to jump straight to getting that a7C Mark II. However, keep in mind that more pixels doesn't always mean better. Yeah, if you're wanting to focus more on photography and plan on making large prints from that, then sure, a 30 plus megapixel sensor is definitely something that you'll want to have. But when it comes to video, 12 megapixels is all you actually need to make 4K video. And if you've ever heard of the Sony a7S line referred to as the king of low light, that's because Sony keeps putting a 12 megapixel sensor in each newer version. And the same is true of the Sony FX3, which I'm shooting with right now. But if you have a camera with a high megapixel count, then that means that it requires a lot more processing when it comes to recording 4K video, whether that's oversampled 6K, line skipping, or pixel binning. And if you don't know what any of that means, do not worry. The main thing to know is that there are going to be more chances for quality issues in your videos because of things like artifacts in your footage due to all the extra processing from the high megapixel count. And I did notice a better low light quality when shooting with the ZV-E1 versus the a7C Mark II. Now, don't get me wrong, the a7C Mark II still did great in lower lighting situations, but there is more noticeable noise. Especially as you boost the ISO into those higher numbers, the ZV-E1 can really hold up a lot better in the shadows before things start falling apart. But the a7C Mark II, you'll see more noise in the shadows right off the bat, but then everything will start to fall apart more quickly than the ZV-E1. But ideally, you don't want to just get a full frame camera because it's better in low light. You'd still want to add lights to any low light situation to make your shots look good, unless you're literally like a run and gun shooter and you don't have time to do any of that, you know, something like a wedding or documentary shooting, whatever. Then yes, it is good to have the better low light quality, but ideally you still want to control the lights in those darker shots. And a benefit of the a7C Mark II having more megapixels is that you can switch to APS-C mode in 4K to crop in 50% more and get even more reach out of your lenses. The ZV-E1 can also do this when shooting in Full HD, but you can't in 4K because the entire sensor is already being used to capture that 4K footage, so there's no way to punch in further. Autofocus on both of these cameras worked great, whether it was my typical tracking shots when coming from far away to near the camera, or testing out the autofocus acquisition and racking focus, which with these cameras you can actually control both the subject shift sensitivity and how quickly they rack focus. And they also both did a good job when testing out a dolly zoom, which tends to be one of the more difficult types of shots to pull off for the autofocus. And the performance of the autofocus in a dolly zoom also would depend on the previously mentioned autofocus sensitivity settings. I have separate videos with a few minutes worth of sample footage for each of these cameras in a variety of situations. If you want to see the type of quality you'll get straight out of the camera with no picture profiles and no color grading or special effects done to it. And I also have Amazon and B&H links for both of these cameras, as well as the lenses I used in those sample footage videos in the description. And if you decide to purchase through those links, it won't cost you anything extra, but it will greatly help out the channel. The other main difference between these two cameras is that the a7C II has an electronic viewfinder, or EVF, whereas the ZV-E1 only has the rear screen to use for monitoring videos and taking pictures. I personally don't care about having an EVF because I like using the larger view screen on the back to monitor when taking photos, but a lot of people, like my wife, like using that EVF when shooting. However, the EVF on the a7C II, in my opinion, is pretty useless because it's so tiny. But both the a7C II and the ZV-E1 have the same size and quality rear touchscreen, so there's no benefit in choosing one over the other in that case. And something I really like on both of these cameras is a newer option that's available called lens breathing compensation. The issue with photography lenses is that they tend to shift the focal length slightly when racking focus, which doesn't really matter when shooting photos, but with video it's very noticeable and can be distracting in your scene. And with the lens breathing compensation turned on, the camera crops in slightly to adjust for that change in focal length to make the rack focusing look really smooth with no focal length changes. The downside here is that this feature is only available with compatible lenses, which seem to be Sony's very expensive G Master line of lenses. Now, you're going to get great quality out of these lenses, but they do cost a lot. Another feature I like on the ZV-E1 that the a7C II does not have is the zoom switch on the top. I like to set the switch to clear image zoom, which allows you to zoom in up to an extra 50% with no noticeable loss in quality. And if you have a power zoom lens, you can use that switch to control the actual zoom on the lens. You can also set it to digital zoom, but I don't like doing that because you will start to lose image quality really quickly when using digital zoom. The a7C II has a slightly larger and more comfortable contoured grip that also has an additional control wheel that I like to set for control of the shutter speed. I'm so used to having that front wheel on all the cameras, even my FX3 has one, and I didn't like the ZV-E1 initially because it didn't have that switch and I had to hit extra buttons to use the back control dial in order to change the shutter speed. But I quickly realized after using that camera for a while that you really don't change the shutter speed much in video anyways, and so it really doesn't matter, and I got used to it pretty quickly. However, if you do want to use the camera for taking photos, then that will be more of an issue if you're going to be changing the shutter speed a lot for your pictures. And keep in mind that with both of these cameras, if you want to shoot in the highest quality video modes, you'll need to have a V90 rated UHS-2 SD card, which get expensive very quickly depending on how large a capacity card you get. So when it comes down to it, the ZV-E1 is a budget full-frame camera that's optimized to getting you really good quality video, and the a7Cii Mark II has many of the same good video features, but it's more geared to being a hybrid camera for both photography and video. So if you're wanting those features like an EVF, the extra control dial for quick shutter speed changes, and really high quality photos, then definitely go for the a7Cii Mark II. But if you're wanting to focus on getting the best video quality possible at a more budget-friendly price, then the ZV-E1 is what I would definitely go for. Regardless of what you choose, both of these cameras will give you great video quality, especially if you know how to control lighting and get some good lenses. You'll really get a lot out of them. And if you do have any questions about any of the features on these cameras, anything I didn't cover, post them down in the comments below and I'll try to help you out the best I can there. And if this video was helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, check out some more videos on the channel because I have a lot of videos with full frame lens suggestions, especially for Sony as well, along with footage to go with it to help you see how good the lenses are and what kind of quality you can get from it, and other things like lighting, framing, lots of videos to help you learn how to tell a better story with your camera. So be sure to check those out, and I'll see y'all in the next one.